but we are thrilled that you are with us this evening. My name is Jill Nogueras, and I am the K-12 English Coordinator in the Department of Learning at the Virginia Department of Education, and we are thrilled that you could be with us this evening. I am out of the corner of my eye checking out how it's going over on YouTube, and I'm loving all of the good evenings and everybody sharing where they're from. This is obviously not the ideal situation. We would love to be together, but I have to admit that this opportunity and hosting these conferences by grade bands has really provided an opportunity for us to get together across the state instead of by region. And it's so wonderful to see you all connecting with people from all corners of Virginia. Just because I'm curious, I would love to know if anyone is here for a 5th night in a row. So if you have been with us all last week for our K2 and 3-5 elementary sessions and you are returning again, we would absolutely love to hear about that in the chat. We are just rolling through these for 8 days straight, and we are so excited. And oh my goodness, looks like we do have a few of you here who are crazy enough to ride with us every single night. So thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing, you know, your dinner hour, your family hour, my relaxing after work hours with us this evening. We know that this is asking a lot, and we are so incredibly grateful that you are here, that you are with us, and that you want to learn all that you can to support students for the 21-22 school year. So without further ado, I will continue moving through. And just want to let you know, first of all, like I said, a huge thank you. We know that this has been quite the past 18 months for all of us. And we know that some of you have already started school. Some of you are in teacher work days. Some of you just started your first teaching jobs ever. And we are so excited. And a few of you are still on vacation. So if you are tuning in from the beach, we are even more impressed. So again, thank you for your dedication to students, to learning, to honing your craft, and your commitment to taking this back to others in your building so that we all can learn and grow and share everything we've learned tonight so that we can, you know, support everyone within our building. Okay, just kind of wanted to give you an overview and an understanding of how this conference is laid out. As you can see, this 6th through 8th grade band conference is scheduled for tonight and tomorrow night. That is an and, not an or, because what you see here are different presentations on different evenings. If we had been able to host our annual SOL conferences, then we would have been together for a full, complete 6-hour day. And we wanted to provide you with that same amount of material. So we've spread it out over 2 nights because we know that 3 hours is already a stretch for some of you, especially after a long day of work. So please note that we have a general session happening right now. And then at the end, we will take, hopefully, because we are running a little bit behind, a 5-minute break before we move into our 7 o'clock session, which is called Do Words Matter, presented from some of our colleagues in Harrisonburg City Schools. And then another 5-minute break so that you can take a stretch, use the restroom, grab a drink, whatever you need to do. And then at 8 o'clock, we will have our last session of the evening, The Power of Short Stories in Teaching Secondary Reading and Writing, from 2 of our colleagues in Loudoun County. Tomorrow, we will have 3 school division presentations. 6 to 6:55 will be student voice and choice to support authenticity in interdisciplinary literacy, which I think is a really cool thing to check out for our middle school teachers with some of the interdisciplinary opportunities that exist for us. So that's 2 of our colleagues from Fairfax. 7 to 7:55 is elevating student voice through guided inquiry with 2 of our colleagues from Williamsburg City Public Schools. And 8 to 8:55 will be implementing performance tasks with integrated strands from 2 of our colleagues in Henrico. So please note, this is a wide variety of topics, and we hope that you will come back and that you will return tomorrow evening for the second portion of our event together. Okay, here is how you can access the English SOL conference resources. So we have a QR code here. We also have a bit.ly that I believe someone is also going to stick over in the YouTube chat for you all so that you can access this folder. This folder will have the conference resources and all of the presentations that you will see tonight and tomorrow night. We will be posting these presentations on the English SOL conference webpage at the conclusion of the conference series, but I will tell you that by attending the live event, you are actually getting additional resources and additional materials that will not be posted on the site. So it's kind of a bonus that you are here this evening, but you're going to want to either use this QR code or use that URL to obtain the information and the resources available that our presenters are going to discuss this evening. Okay, so without further ado, and because I want to make sure that we stay on schedule, I want to talk to you guys about this year's goals for teaching literacy. We have been in such an interesting situation over the last 18 months, and we're all trying to wrap our heads around what literacy and instruction looks like moving forward. So what we want to talk about tonight is how to address literacy instruction using a comprehensive approach. Not strand by strand or not one presentation mode over another. How do we handle this in a comprehensive way to support our students and to scaffold understanding? We also have with us team members from our Office of Student Assessment to discuss with you the middle school growth measures and how we can use those growth measures as a tool to support teaching and learning. So they will talk to you about the new legislation and what that means for you as educators in buildings. And then we will come around and talk about, now that we have this information and we understand what we're going to get from these assessments, how can we move forward and practice and support our students through literacy instruction using the resources and materials we have to support what our students need, specifically addressing unfinished learning and some gaps our students may have from interrupted instruction. And then just want to wrap out our time together by showing you how to access resources and guidance available on our website. We realize that it is huge. We have a massive website and it's filled with really helpful information, but if you don't know how to find it, it isn't all that helpful. So we want to make sure that we are pointing out specific tools for you to use to support your instruction moving forward. Okay, so thinking about comprehensive literacy, this is something that we as an office, and actually I'm going to pause right here because this is just how this evening has gone. This is something we've been working on the last couple of years, and in the last couple of years, we have added some people to our office, and I am so incredibly sorry, Colleen, that I blew right past our introductions, and I would love for you to get on and say a quick hello to everyone here this evening before I get into comprehensive literacy.
No worries, Jill. It is that kind of night, but I do just want to say hello to all of my middle school people out there. We are so glad to have you here. And yeah, this is going to be an exciting 2 nights.
And I definitely wanted you all to see her face and know her name because she is our middle school specialist at the Virginia Department of Education. So if you have middle school burning questions, please feel free to reach out to Colleen. We're also missing our elementary English and reading specialist this evening, Miss Carmen Curick, who is out on maternity leave, but sometimes she is listening via the YouTube as well and lets us know how things are going. So shout out to both of them. Glad that they are with us, glad that they are on this team, and we all worked really hard to put this conference together and tried to engage with different divisions across the state so that you could get a wide variety of perspectives and best practices to support you in your classroom. All right, so moving into comprehensive literacy. We like to talk about comprehensive literacy with the idea of building our unit plans or our instructional plans around a theme or an essential question. Instead of saying, this is my short story unit entirely, or this is my poetry unit, or this is when I do nonfiction research, we'd like to think about it, how we can bring in multiple genres of reading and instruction and just analysis into a more thematic approach, where we can think about a topic that our students might find interesting, or a current event that's going on that might engage or pull them in, or just concepts that we think really might hook our readers, and then find materials that go along with that, bringing in and integrating the strands of reading, writing, research, and communication multimodal literacies. So the amazing thing about our literacy instruction is that we are a K-12 skills-based course, which means some of the material and skills that we are learning in kindergarten, first grade, we are still learning as we hit our senior year in high school. It's just what we are doing with those skills and the text that we are interacting with is what changes and gets more complex as we move through our study of literacy. All right, so we want to talk about in here how we can take and scaffold some of that in understanding for our students, because we are desperately trying to make sure that they have the skills that they missed over the last year and a half, but that we are promoting and pushing them where they need to go along. And so taking this comprehensive approach and putting reading and writing and research together, all tied through the lens of a certain topic or a certain question, seems to be a pretty good approach. It also allows us to spiral in some of those skills and also highlight Virginia's 5 C's. All right, so we also like to talk about this comprehensive literacy by bringing in diverse texts. And diverse text means that we are reflecting real world experiences and situations and current events, that we are bringing in different voices and characters that represent the cultures of the students in your community, but maybe in other communities as well, or other parts of the world. We want to bring in stories and current events and people and questions and, just all sorts of topics that look at other parts of our world and what is outside of our community that would give us a broader scope and understanding of the world around us, which is why it's so important and a great opportunity to really look at interdisciplinary literacy, because that literacy can also help us provide the scaffolds that students need to understand some of the science and some of the historical events that they're going to learn about in other classes when we bring in literature from different places. It also provides an opportunity for our students to explore worlds outside of their community. Several of our students, many of our students, oftentimes don't leave within a 30-mile radius of where they live. So how can we bring the world to them? So we like to talk about diverse texts, because with a skills-based course, we can find the main idea and the supporting details in anything that we're looking at. We can look at the character development in any story that we are reading. So we have the opportunity to bring in different literature for our students to grapple with and to think about and to really engage and get excited about. And in middle school, we start introducing this idea of paired passages and analyzing and comparing and contrasting in upper elementary. But the sweet spot for where we really consider this comparing and contrasting happens when we are in middle school, when we ask kids to start thinking about not just how are they the same and different, but what am I supposed to get from each of these texts? What's missing from each of these texts? And how can we increase their level of thinking through these texts? So when we offer students the opportunity to look at paired text and text sets, this allows us to bring in a variety of texts for our students. It allows us to bring in some of that student choice. And it also allows us to offer some student scaffolding and a variety of texts to meet the different levels of reading that are currently in our classrooms. So it allows us for everybody to explore possibly the same topic or the same question, but look at text and resources that match where they are instructionally, but then also pairing that with grade level text that we can support as instructors to kind of push them where they need to go. We also want to consider student-driven research. Yes, as English teachers, most of us in secondary have a research unit that we really go through the whole process from start to finish. We learn note cards, we learn outlining, we learn how to organize things. We look at credibility of sites and sources. But we want students to see research as far more ongoing. Again, I realize we have an obligation to walk them through the process at some point in the year, but we want them to see that it's something that, they're constantly asking questions and constantly seeking information, and showing them that we go out and we look for this information and we consider our sources and we decide whether or not we want to believe from that source based on what we know. So the idea that research can be student driven and not just that once a year project in March or April where we're really trying to get through those research standards, but that this is something that's ongoing. And as students are thinking about text and writing about text and connecting with text, that they can take it a step further and seek out more information themselves. We also want to focus on self-expression through communication and multimodal literacies. Having our students communicate, whether that is spoken or communicate, whether that is through writing. So as you see, these things always come back together. So asking our students to reflect on what they've read, whether, again, that might be in a Socratic seminar, that might be through a journal entry, that might be through a formal essay, whatever the case may be, asking our students to reflect. And if you've looked at the 2017 English Standards of Learning, you'll see that reflective writing is introduced in middle school for the first time. It also allows our students to use authors as models, and it allows us to model writing for our students. Yes, that is an important part. We can't just assign writing and keep it moving. We need to actually model for them what that writing looks like and the tough work of writing, and that we all can always improve. It doesn't matter that we are the adults and they are the students. This is something we all can improve on. And then allowing students to engage in the writing process and learning how to accept feedback, how to give feedback, and then always understanding that we write for a variety of purposes and in a variety of modes. Our teacher isn't always going to be our audience, and we aren't always going to write formal essays. So what kind of practice can we give them to give themselves some self-expression through that communication and writing? And before I switch this over to our colleagues in the Office of Student Assessment, Accountability, and ESEA programs, I want to leave you with this before we move on to assessment. This is my clip art scale here, but we like to think about this as a balance. When we think about a comprehensive approach to literacy, for a long time, we talked about making sure that our students were reading grade level texts and that everything was rigorous, and that we made sure that we were using very distinguished writing, and that we were intentional and said, these are the books and the pieces you must learn in 6th grade and 7th grade and 8th grade. They must be aligned with the standards, and we need to push our students to move forward. Trust me, I'm not saying we don't need to do that. But then for a little while, the pendulum swung a little and was like, well, our students aren't going to get there if they're not interested, and we don't give them choice, and it doesn't feel relevant, and we don't give them time in text, and we don't work on those foundational skills that they missed. And that, as you can see, is kind of the other side of that balance, that scale. Well, what I'm here to say is that for our students to be successful moving forward, we are really at a place where we need to offer and expect both of these from our students. If students are only ever in books that they are interested in and never kind of get out of that space, then they're never learning how to read another style of writing or to look at another perspective. But if we are also always just using really rigorous, complex text, then we are not providing a scaffolding that students need to be successful. So when we think about a comprehensive approach to literacy, we want to make sure that we are offering instruction and experiences in our class that lead to balancing out both sides of this scale. If we want our students to be successful with some of their interrupted learning and some of that scaffolding and unfinished learning that has happened, that we need to kind of move students along, but we need to meet them where we are. We need to make sure that we are providing them with those relevant high interest books and time to read, but at the same time supporting and scaffolding instruction of that complex text and grade level text that students will need to be successful with in order to be successful and move on to the next grade level. So we will look a little bit more at how we can get to this and what tools and resources we have. But I want to move this over and invite our colleagues in the Office of Student Assessment to talk to you now about the growth assessments that I know you're all very excited to learn about. So I will mute myself, but I will be here to move slides.
All right. Thanks very much, Jill. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Susbury. I'm the Director of Student Assessment at the Department of Education, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to speak with everyone tonight. Thanks for joining and taking the time out of your day to hop on here in the evening. Okay, what we're going to talk about is the fall growth assessments, and you may or may not have heard about them, probably depending on where you are in returning to the school year. And gonna love that phone call. So let's go ahead and go to the first slide, please, Jill. Okay, so these assessments were introduced through legislation. So back in the 21 General Assembly, the 2021 General Assembly, a bill was introduced. Actually, two bills were introduced that require the implementation of through-year growth assessments in reading and mathematics in grades 3 through 8. So that was an opportunity for the department to introduce these new assessments that you're hearing called growth assessments. In the first year of implementation, it calls for the administration of these assessments in both the fall and then in the spring for students that are in grades 3 through 8, reading and mathematics, and really with the goal of measuring growth. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go here. This is a 2-year implementation, and the second year of implementation will occur the next school year, the 2022-2023 school year. And the legislation requires that the department implement both a fall assessment and a mid-year or winter assessment, as we're referring to it, in addition to the spring assessment. So again, in this first school year coming up, there will be a fall assessment and then a spring assessment. And then in the second year of implementation, we're talking about the legislation requiring us to have a fall, a mid-year, and a spring assessment in grades 3 through 8, reading and mathematics. Okay, so let's talk about the specific implementation. There have been a number of questions about what the assessment will be that gets administered this fall. And I want to assure you that we're talking about an assessment that's aligned to the standards of learning. It's been developed by staff at the Department of Education. It will be a computer adaptive test, which is what the students are used to at this point. And it will use existing SOL test items. So test items that have been field tested with students, and we have information about how those items perform. And then specifically in the first year of implementation in fall of 2021, the assessments that are going to be administered to students are going to be based on the previous grade level's content. Okay, so if I'm a 5th grader this year, that means that the assessment that I am taking this fall will be based on my 4th grade content. So we're focusing on previous content that was instructed, really with the goal of identifying any unfinished learning from the 2020-2021 school year, and really as a result of the pandemic. So students that are enrolled in grades 4 through 8, reading and math, will take that assessment that's based on the previous grade level's content. And then for students that are in grade 3, they're coming into the 3rd grade for the first time this fall. They will be assessed with grade 3 SOL test items that are primarily focused on content covered in grade 2. So I know that we're talking with teachers of 6th through 8th grade here this evening, but I wanted to at least share that information so you have awareness of how that's working. And then on the next slide, thank you, we've got just a rough picture here of what these computer adaptive tests will be like. We have taken the SOL test blueprints that you're familiar with, and we have shortened those or reduced them proportionately so that we could have shorter tests available. So as you can see on this screen, the 3 through 8 reading tests range between 17 to 19 test items. And in the math, we've got between 20 and 25 test items. So those are shorter than the regular SOL tests that are administered normally in the springtime of the year. The one exception to that is that with the timing of this legislation being introduced, we didn't have an opportunity to be able to administer develop shorter paper tests. So that means that paper tests will be available for the small number of students that need them, usually students that have a visual impairment and they're needing a Braille form or a large print form for the most part. So in that situation, the assessments that were administered in the spring will be administered in the fall again. So it will be a full-length paper test for those students this fall. And then I mentioned that we would be having 2 growth assessments. Really, that second growth assessment administered in the spring is the normally occurring SOL test. So that will be happening as the SOL test is normally administered each spring. So that will be the second assessment. And then these assessments really do have a different purpose than an SOL test. And we're trying to reflect that in the message that we are sharing with schools and hoping that you'll share with your students that first of all, there really is no passing or failing score on these assessments that they'll be taking this fall when they arrive at school. The test really is to help teachers know what the students can do well and what other areas they may need some additional assistance and support. And then we're encouraging teachers again to encourage the students to just do their best on these tests and answer the questions the best that they can. And if they're not sure how to answer a question, then just pick the best answer and move to the next question. So again, trying to reduce that stress level, hopefully, associated with these assessments. We've been talking with the division directors of testing, and that information has been shared with the school test coordinators. Things like removing or covering curricular materials from your walls. That's another thing that is different about this assessment, where we're not requiring that this year. We know that teachers have spent a lot of time and energy getting their classrooms ready. And the last thing we want you to have to do is to take all of those resources off your wall. So the DDOTs, or the division directors of testing, and the school test coordinators have been given details related to that. So again, it really does have a different purpose this year than in the fall than the SOL tests do in the spring. And on the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about measuring growth. And because that's really the purpose of these assessments in the first place, that fall assessment is intended to provide a baseline through which we can measure how much progress or how much growth a student makes throughout the school year by comparing the spring assessment and the fall assessment. So Jill, if you'll go to the next slide, some of you may have seen this graphic previously. As you can see, there are some stick figures here on this slide, and this is in reference to the combined rate, which is used for accreditation purposes. In other words, has a school met an accreditation indicator, and the combined rate is one of those related to student performance. Previously, it used to be just, did the student pass the test? And your pass rate was determined basically on the number of students passing, and that was what was used as an indicator for accreditation. The state board adopted this combined rate and allows us to have the benefit of schools receiving the benefit of students who show growth. They may not pass the SOL test, but they have improved their performance during the year. So if you look at our little green stick figures and the burgundy stick figures, there are 10 of them there. Normally, previously it would have been a 60% pass rate because there are 6 students out of 10 that have passed. But where we're able to count growth now in the combined rate, you can see that we have one additional student who didn't pass their SOL test, but they did make enough improvement to show growth. So the school will receive the benefit for that student in the calculation of the combined rate. And then also we have the English learner progress figuring into the combined rate as well, where we've got another student who wasn't successful on passing the reading test, but this was a student that's learning English. So they were successful on performing well on their English proficiency assessment. So they were able to show progress in their learning of English as their language. And that student also, because of their progress, is counted towards the combined rate and a positive direction for the school. So you can see that although there were only 6 students passing here, we ended up with 2 additional students being included because of growth or progress. So this ends up, this school would end up with an 80% pass rate on the combined rate. So that's one of the purposes of using growth is for the accreditation ratings that have to be applied. So you can see how that figures in and is a positive situation for a school when you have students that just haven't made it to that proficient mark, but have definitely shown growth. So as we go forward into this coming school year, I talked about a fall assessment being administered and a spring assessment in spring 22 will be the regular SOL test. So there are going to be 2 ways that a school can show growth or a student can show growth. The spring 22 score will be compared to either the spring 21 score that the student earned, or it will be compared to how the student did on the fall 21 growth assessment. So we're looking at 2 possible scenarios for a student to be able to show growth, whether it's from spring to spring or from the fall assessment that they'll be taking shortly this year and comparing that to the spring assessment. And whichever comparison shows growth will be used for the accreditation calculation. So I mentioned previously that there would be a 3rd assessment implemented during the 2nd year of the legislation or during the 22-23 school year. At that point, we'll have a fall assessment and a mid-year assessment and then a spring assessment. So we'll be working at the department to determine how those 3 assessments will be used to measure growth. So more details about what methods we'll be using for that as we go forward. And then I want to go ahead and go to the next slide and we'll talk about looking ahead a little bit to the 2nd year of implementation or the next school year, 2022-2023. That's when the full implementation will happen. We'll continue to be administering these growth assessments in grades 3 through 8, reading and mathematics. And it will go from being administered just in the fall to then be administered in the fall and the mid-year. And we're talking mid-year and the winter timeframe sort of interchangeably there. And then the 3rd assessment that will occur will be the normally occurring spring computer adaptive assessment. So that will be the regular SOL test that's administered in the spring. So we'll be measuring growth across those 3 assessments in the 22-23 school year. And then on this last slide, I want to just call your attention to that again, it will continue to be a computer adaptive test that students take in the online environment. The blueprints for these tests in 22-23 will be shortened again. And so unlike this year, where students are taking an assessment that matches what they were instructed in last year, these assessments in 22-23 will depend on which course the student is enrolled in for that year. So if I am enrolled as a 5th grader this fall, in the fall of 22-23, I will be taking an assessment that is based on that 5th grade level. And then from there, we will be using the benefits of computer adaptive testing and allowing that computer algorithm to administer test items that go above grade level if the student is doing well, or perhaps go below grade level if the student is struggling with some of that content. So again, this is in the second year of implementation that we're looking at this going forward. But it will be an opportunity for using that computer adaptive technology to go what we refer to as off grade level. And then for the third graders, again, just to give you this for context, we're talking about having content that is measuring second grade standards of learning. So we're developing test items at grade 2 that could be available for students that are struggling with that grade 3 content in the fall of their third grade year. The other benefit that another year of this implementation gets us is it does provide us with time to be able to develop shorter paper tests. We're pleased to be able to do that. We were concerned, and we are concerned that we're not able to do that for this year, that we are having to administer the full length paper tests. But by the 22-23 school year, for those students that do need a paper test, we will certainly have a shorter version of that test available for measuring growth. So that's a brief update on where we are with the growth assessments. These tests begin to be administered. August 23rd is the earliest date that school divisions can administer them. So I know some of you that may be in school already will be gearing up to do that. We have a number of school divisions that are going to be starting to administer these assessments next week. And then that test window runs through October. So we know that that will be going on for a little bit as well. And at this point, I'm going to take a quick look and see if we have any questions that need to be answered. I'm seeing a question about, are all 3 assessments computer adaptive? And yes, they will be. The only ones that are not, obviously, are the paper assessments, but one of the requirements of the legislation is that we're using the computer adaptive technology to administer these assessments. Okay, is there anything else anyone sees that I should be addressing, or do you think we're set?
Hey, Sarah, I think we're set. I know that some questions have been popping back and forth in the chat, and Colleen is obtaining those answers and putting them back over in YouTube. So I think you guys are on it tonight. So thank you so much.
Okay, well, thanks for having us.
Absolutely. And a huge shout out to our assessment team. This is a huge turnaround. Nothing at the DOE moves quickly. We're like a massive ship. And so this legislation just got signed this spring, and we are ready to go for August 23rd. So I can't even imagine the hours that were put into that. So thank you to you and your team. And again, for anybody watching from home, we do have their contact information at the end of this presentation if you have any additional follow-up questions. And I know that as soon as they have information live and ready to go on the website or on the internet, we will be sure to share that information out as well. So thank you, Sarah, for your commitment, and after a long day, still being with us at 6:42.
Thanks, Jill. I appreciate it. And thanks to all of the teachers. Have a great one.
Thank you. And thank you to you, Shelley. I know you're here, even though we're having some audio issues. So thank you for helping us feed some answers back over to YouTube. Thank you, ladies. Right. So let's see, here we go. All right. So now that you have just kind of a short overview about these growth assessments and the kind of information that we are going to get as educators to help support our students moving forward, we're going to get a great kind of like pre-test and an idea of where our students are when they walk in this year so that we can figure out where we need to go next. You know, some of our students, like I said, had some interrupted learning and may be further behind than they typically would be. Other students really capitalized on independent learning time and have kept going and soaring through even the craziest of pandemics and are ready to be challenged some more. So this will provide us with information that we can use in a classroom to support students. And what I'd like to do now is talk about some of the essential skills and instructional practices that we want to consider as we're moving forward with these students. But if we're thinking about this year specifically, the 2020-2021 Ooh, wow, I'm a year behind the 21-22 school year. We want to think about where we start with students. And if we are working and teaching sixth grade this year, and we are worried that our students missed a good chunk of fifth grade material, but we spend half of a year trying to reteach and learn fifth grade material, then we are putting our students a whole half a year behind in their sixth grade material. So we want to address unfinished learning by spiraling and scaffolding that unfinished learning and those skills that didn't get covered in our new learning. So we've included an article here to kind of support that research and that work, but then to show you some resources that the Virginia Department of Education has to help you in moving forward. When we think about our K-12 instructional practices, this is what we want to see from teachers. If we're thinking about, and this is K-12, and I know that I'm with middle school right now, but when we think about reading, if we had to take all of those standards or that 300-page curriculum framework and really put it down into some essential instructional practices, this is what we would want to see for our students. We would want to see student choice. We would want them to be comparing and contrasting fiction and nonfiction on grade level text and making connections between the intent of the author and the content of the text. We want them to engage in deeper learning, writing for a variety of authentic purposes, providing feedback in conferences and conferring with one another and with teachers. And we want to, again, look at research as an ongoing practice. But what I really want to highlight here, especially with a middle school group, is that we are asking students in middle school to really focus on analyzing ideas in text and then searching for textual evidence to support the conclusions that they draw based on what they've read. This is how we know they're engaging in deeper learning. So we want to make sure that we are providing them with opportunities to do so. If we were to look at this just in a grade 6 through 8 band, we would want our students to have these opportunities. So again, if I'm taking those 6 through 8 standards of learning and condensing them down into just a few bullet points, the essentials you will see of what we want our students to be able to know, understand, and do, this is what you would see. But again, this isn't just picking out specific standards of learning to focus on. It's looking at the skills that we want our students to have practice with and focusing our energy on these skills so that students can feel comfortable moving on with more complex texts. So as you can see here, we've put together what we would think are essentials within this grade band. We've also incorporated these for K2, 3, 5, and 9, 12. So if you find yourself with students this year that may be a little bit below this band or ready to try something beyond the 8th grade band, we also have those materials as well. On our DOE webpage, which is also going to be linked here, we have a section called Virginia Learns Anywhere. The Virginia Learns Education in Uncertain Times. And what you will see here is that we have these language arts essentials by grade band for you to pull and use in your classrooms. And this is just kind of screenshots of what they look like so that you can access them more readily on the website. And when you would, if you looked at the language arts essentials, you would see that we have these by grade band with some just generic but very important comprehensive understanding over on the left-hand side of what our students need. And if you were to look specifically at the language arts essentials for grades 6 through 8, you would see basically what was on the previous slides, just done in a slightly different format. So what you see here are the communication and multimodal literacies bullets that I talked about on the other page. But what you will see are this is a language arts garage. So these are tires, or you can think of them as bubbles. I don't know how they're showing up on your side, but basically, we have these listed by the strand and the color of the strand. So if you are looking at that communication and multimodal literacies, above it, you'll see a tire that's red. And that red aligns with the reading strand that is listed below. So what we have done is we are showing you what's important in each of those strands, but showing you how to incorporate and integrate essential concepts from the other strands to show you that they work together and that our students will have a better understanding if we put these ideas together. This is not to limit you to just say, this is the only thing from reading that works with communication. Absolutely not. We just couldn't have too many bubbles or it would be too busy. It's just an illustration to show you that when we are working with communication and multimodal literacies, here are some pieces and essential understandings from the reading, the writing, and the research that we might want to pull in to support our students' learning. And we have those available, of course, for research and writing. So that material can be found on that Virginia Learns Anywhere site that is linked here and that you will have access to when we post these. Additionally, we have created another year's worth of unfinished learning logs. And so what you see here is just a quick snapshot of what you recognize as the 8th grade English standards of learning, just a snippet. And what you will see here is an opportunity for teachers. So this would be used mostly on a building level, or possibly a feeder pattern into elementary into middle or something, where a teacher could say that they feel they sufficiently were able to cover these skills during the interrupted 2020-2021 school year. Or they could check off and say, you know what, it just didn't happen, I'm sorry, all right? And the important part of this tool is that it shows you in the subsequent grade where that skill might come up again. So it also means, though, that when we hit 9th grade, obviously what we are asking our students to do with that skill also gets more complex. But if your students are struggling with something, this might help you identify where you might need to scaffold and fold in some of that missed learning. So if you're looking at idioms and they're having a really hard time even understanding what you're talking about, well, in 8th grade, they're identifying the meaning of idioms. So you may need to kind of fold that in and support that in the 9th grade year. So we have these posted K-12 for all of the standards to kind of support you. So if you're an 8th grade teacher, you can look at the 7th grade one and see where it's addressed in 8th grade so that you have a clearer understanding of where your students might be. And again, this could be used really well in a PLC or in a department meeting, wherever it seems most useful, but that's just a tool for you all to have. And then I'm going to fly through some supports and resources that are all going to be linked here for you. We have a whole section called Learning in Place, where we have gone and identified websites that align with our strands. And as you can see, this is the 6 through 8 snapshot of different resources that you could pull to use in your classroom or to suggest to students, maybe if they're going to do some work outside of the classroom or some additional resource, or as for tutoring after school or whatever the case may be, now that everyone seems to be working with a one-on-one device, where they could pull some text or some games or some resources to kind of support that instruction outside of your classroom. We also have over 100 comprehensive instructional plans posted. These kind of replace the old enhanced scope and sequence, and are posted by grade band and by strand. So as you see here, we have cause and effect and its impact on plot, and it shows you the standards that it aligns to, making inferences and drawing conclusions. So you can go to this site. The QR code is here. It's also linked. You can also search it on the DOE site, but you can pull up any of these instructional plans and use pieces or all of them in your classroom. But they are set up by showing you the primary strand that the lesson is featuring and is really honing in on and working on, but it'll also show you those integrated strands and reinforced strands that are related to that you would use for scaffolding understanding. It'll review the essential understandings, any materials that you may need. And then it also provides information about academic background that students may need to be successful with this instructional plan, or possibly academic language to support your English language learners in the classroom. Just some reminders of what might support your students. It also goes through what the student should be doing and what teachers should be doing within this instructional plan to kind of walk you through what could be happening in the classroom. And then it offers a variety of options for assessment, whether diagnostic, formative, and summative. And then if it's a reading instructional plan, it'll identify some writing connections, or if it's a writing plan, it might identify some research connections or some reading connections. And then it also offers some extensions and connections for students who are ready to go a little farther, and then strategies for differentiation for students who might need a little bit more support. Additionally, we do have posted for you, we worked with our colleagues in the Office of Student Assessment to create some assessment supports webinars to help you think about instruction leading up to your end of year SOL assessment. So we have webinar recordings with the presentations and annotated passages to help support you as you identify how you want to attack instruction leading up to those end of year assessments, and also seeing how you might consider asking your students questions regarding specific standards of learning. I highly suggest you check out the overall assessment supports, because that webinar will identify and show you which SOLs are present in which of the grade level recordings to help you identify where you might see some scaffolding and structuring of questions. We also have our VDOE, Professional Development on Demand, where we have grouped together professional development webinars, comprehensive literacy plans, PDFs, instructional plans, best practices, whatever you want, specific to different topics. And this is just showing you the screenshot, but I believe we have about 20 different topics posted right now, and this page will continue to grow as we are able to offer more. But we are encouraging schools to look at this, maybe instead of a PLC meeting or instead of a faculty meeting, possibly maybe your local division would even consider providing you with some recertification points if you took the time to watch some of these best practices. We have stuff on learning in place and integrated instruction and disciplinary literacy, you name it, it's on here. So I highly suggest you check that out. We also have many webinars posted on comprehensive literacy, and you might find something here that you could watch on your own time and then incorporate into your classrooms as well. Many of these are posted, and this is just kind of a snapshot of what the top of the page looks like to help you find the material. Lastly, we do have a couple of conferences happening this year that I want to make sure you are aware of. Our Virginia Association of Teachers of English, which is the local affiliate of our National Council for Teachers of English, is hosting an annual conference in person in Charlottesville, October 8th and 9th. So that's a Friday and a Saturday, and you can register for Friday only, or Friday and Saturday, or Saturday only. So there's a variety of options there, but wanted you to know that that was up and available. And as of right now, the Virginia State Literacy Association is planning their spring conference to be hosted in Crystal City, March 17th through 19th. So that information is there as well. If you haven't already subscribed to our Teacher Direct newsletter, I definitely think this would be worth your time. This will be one email a week that comes out on Wednesdays that includes all information that's specific to educators. So it'll be professional development, competitions, grants, superintendent's memos that apply to what you're working with. And it is not just specific to English. You can find this about any content area that you're interested in. So if you would like to do that, if you just sign up for it, it will come to you. You don't have to go seeking out the information. And lastly, we are hosting an inaugural family literacy night that will be August 31st from 6 to 9. And this is actually geared at families. We'd be happy to have you here as well. We'd love for you to sign up, but we'd also love for you to share it with your communities, with your parents, maybe at back to school night or as an option. It'll be streaming on 3 different YouTube channels, and we have a variety of topics between connecting with our colleagues in family engagement and equity and community engagement, our special ed department, our Office of Student Assessment, and then our state organizations will all be presenting. So we hope that you will check out that page. Our social media, the VDOE News social media has been highlighting it and the different sessions that will be offered. So if you are interested or you have colleague or parents who might be interested. We're really just trying to rally around kids and get them excited about literacy this year and give families some options of how they might support and engage their students at home in a very meaningful way that doesn't feel like school. So what can parents do at home to support? So the DOE wants to kind of support that effort and rally around with you guys and help our students moving forward. So if you would please share that information, we would love to see you all there. And lastly, this is our contact information. We do answer all of our own phone calls and emails, so please feel free to reach out. I know this was a whirlwind hour together. I've seen in the chat, I know it's a lot, but I appreciate you all being here. As I posted in this chat, this will be posted, both the PowerPoint and the recording will be posted on the DOE SOL conference webpage at the conclusion of the conference series. So it will be a little while, but it will be posted. So you will be able to come back to this anytime you want to look at things and look at materials and reference them. So